Greetings, everyone. Peace to you all.
Hey there. Hello? Can you hear me?
Welcome to another episode of Praiseworthy Reviews, where we go through video games to see if they are excellent and commendable. Today, we will be reviewing thealters, a narrative survival management game by 11-Bit Studios. Players play as Jan Dolsky, a builder stranded on a space expedition gone awry, forced to create alternate versions of himself in an attempt to escape his hostile environment. As usual, we will be evaluating the game based on 5 criteria: fun factor, educational value, cultural value, spiritual value, and cost. Regarding the technical state of the game, thealters performed pretty flawlessly, with essentially no issues during my playtime, except for getting stuck temporarily once or twice during fast travel. For context, prior to this review, I have played This War of Mine, and I have finished this game to the credits. So without further ado, let's jump in. The gameplay of thealters is a little hard to explain, but to me it is very reminiscent of one of 11-Bit Studios' previous works, This War of Mine, with added 3D exploration. Some have compared the exploration gameplay to the first Death Stranding, but I think the similarities there are only superficial. Essentially, the game combines survival exploration, base management, and role-playing aspects into something fairly unique. The survival exploration part of the game is rather simplistic. Jan needs to spend time looking for resources like metals, organics, or rupidium to craft items and build up the base. For many of these resource deposits, using a polygonal scanner is needed to find the exact spot a mining outpost should be crafted. The way that the outposts and pylons are constructed does feel like Death Stranding, but the ease of traversal is completely different. You don't really need to plan ahead, and in many cases you can craft what you need as you go. Exploration is important for recovering side quest items, as well as discovering critical mission locations for main objectives. The game makes exploration a little more interesting by changing up the terrain with a variety of obstacles like cliffs and rock barriers. Another superficial similarity to Death Stranding might be the way Jan needs to avoid or deal with anomalies, but they are nowhere near as scary as that game's BTs. Besides exploration, the base building and management is an integral part of the experience. This aspect of the game feels a lot like This War of Mine. Jan and his alters must manage the storage for the resources collected. There is a limit to how much stuff can be collected at any given point in time.
Hey man, we're running out of storage space.
As Jan builds new modules for the base, where each module goes in the base structure must also be managed. This is a little bit like base building in XCOM, but much more forgiving. The most difficult part of managing the base, in my opinion, is probably limiting the weight of the base. Besides building up the base, Jan and his alters must manage their own survival needs, doing things like filtering radiation, growing food, and crafting additional exploration equipment. As far as progression goes, Jan needs to use his resources to research new tools for exploration, better ways of managing economy, more modules to build, and mission-critical items. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of the game is the role-playing. The game constantly provides a surprising amount of choice and consequence. Players must choose which alters and how many to alterate. I've heard some players complain that you can only know the alters' abilities but not their personalities before you create them, but I think that is only partially true. If you read the mine records carefully, you can actually get a sense of what each alter will be like. Whether you are able to successfully manage the alters as a leader is probably the best part of the game, combining classic and emergent narrative with small mini-stories happening among the alters while the overall story is linear. In my opinion, this works really well compared to the procedural storytelling of This War of Mine, which was not ideal in many ways. Role-playing also has a few other things you can do with your alters, like socializing and side quests. In my humble opinion, this is one of those more than the sum of its parts type situations, and I was generally enjoying myself throughout most of the game. Overall, I'm going to give the game 4 stars for fun factor. In terms of motor skills, there's little value in the alters. Jan can run around and zap anomalies, but that is almost painfully easy. There is actually some negative educational content in terms of misspelled words in the subtitles. This happened more than once, and I don't know if that was the product of some AI translation. I also didn't like the sci-fi fake science. Now, in many science fiction games, there will inevitably be fictional science. However, it's kind of irritating that the game takes more artistic license with science than most sci-fi games. and the lack of educational content on quantum physics or quantum computing feels like a missed opportunity.
Subverting its physical balance and distorting the rules of Newtonian mechanics.
Something that bothered me more than it should is that the scientist is just the scientist, as though physics is real science and botany is not. Don't get me wrong, I think that physics, and particularly quantum physics, plays a more critical role in the game, but the game treats the physicist as a real scientist, a genius, whereas the botanist is basically a gardener. Despite these issues, there is still some factual knowledge here, even if it is not particularly helpful. References to Albert Camus and Sisyphus, as well as other stuff I won't mention because of spoilers, does keep the game from feeling too dumbed down. I also like the references to the quantum computer, but I felt like the capabilities and how it works was not well explained. Overall, I'm going to give the game 3 stars for educational value. As far as the art of the altars is concerned, I found the visual style very striking with a clear, coherent identity. I like the UI for different modules, as well as the mine records. The animations were less impressive overall, with the exception of the manufacturing of the outposts and the pylons that are similar to Death Stranding. I generally enjoyed all the sound effects and thought they worked rather well. The music, however, was very forgettable, with the exception of a noteworthy song that I don't want to spoil.
You feel like you have something to prove to each other, but you don't. Not with those sharp minds and tongues.
The voice acting is surprisingly good. Alex Jordan does the impossible by acting as more than 10 biologically identical people who are nonetheless different, making them feel quite distinct.
Maybe we'll bond over analyzing your shortcomings.
The writing of the altars has many strengths, even if there are a few things that I don't like about it. The primary setting of the game is nothing special, but it works. A hostile planet with a dangerous sun and strange anomalies. The main plot has some interesting conflicts and forces the player to make some meaningful choices regarding what kind of people Jan and his altars want to be. Best of all, most of the altars are fairly unique individuals, despite being genetically identical. I like how the morally questionable characters are fleshed out just enough for you to have to figure out what to do. The ending I finished the game with was a reasonable conclusion to the narrative. Despite the generally good aspects of the writing, the dialogue often felt weak or even a little cliche, with quite a bit of inconsistency in the quality. It's still a little early for sales numbers, but at time of recording, 11-Bit Studio has shared that the game has sold over 280,000 copies in a little under a month since release. Overall, I'm going to assign the altars 5 stars for its cultural value. In the altars, there is a lot of negative content. The game states that there is some violence and gore, but in my playthrough, I basically didn't encounter any at all. It may only be for specific choices. There is lots of beer, a drinking game, and one scene of drunkenness. There's vulgar language throughout. There's one character who is implied to use drugs, but whether the drugs are actually supplied is up to the player. One character clearly identifies as homosexual, while another is polyamorous.
You know, experimenting with different stuff.
Despite the significant amounts of negative content, I actually feel that the game is pretty reflective about it. There are many opportunities to react to the negative content, and I appreciate that the game gives the character that sort of agency. ESRB rates this game as mature, but honestly, it doesn't feel too bad. I would be okay with high school teens playing this. The messages of the game are generally positive, although I think it will click for some people more than others. For more analysis on the themes of the game, check out my biblical themes videos for this game.
Think about where you took a different path and why.
Overall, I'm going to assign the game 4 stars for spiritual value. In terms of cost, I think that the altars does quite well in terms of both content and pricing.
This journey, it's taking longer than I thought.
For the time poor, the main story can be completed in around 25 hours, with me trying to do most side quests but not trying to be completionist, so the story is quite accessible. My playthrough resulted in a fairly satisfying ending, and I do not plan on replaying the game. However, for the time rich, there is some replayability here, since it actually takes 2 full playthroughs to see all the altars and do their quest lines, and there are actually meaningful choice and consequence branches that can lead to quite different experiences and endings, increasing its content value. The altars retails for $34.99 USD, which I feel is pretty solid value. Overall, based on the content value, narrative accessibility, and asking price, I'm going to give the game 5 stars for cost. The Altars is a video game that doesn't do anything groundbreaking or special, and yet still manages to feel quite fresh, taking the common survival-based management formula and adding its own unique twist to create a game that is memorable and feels like it adds to the conversation. Even though it does well in many ways, there are multiple examples of a general lack of polish that keeps the game from being truly excellent. Based on the criteria discussed in the video, I subjectively assign the alters the rating of sale selection. That's all I have for you in this video.
Take care then, and talk soon.
Bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If this video blessed you in some way, please consider watching some of my other videos, subscribing, or sharing with me some of your thoughts in the comments below.